Welcome to today's webinar on leading your projects with values. This webinar is one of a series hosted by the AASHTO Technical Committee on Project Management. I'm Patricia Bush, Senior Program Manager for Bridges and Design at AASHTO, and today's host. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes to help you enjoy today's session. All attendees are automatically muted for the entire webinar. If you have questions at any point during the presentations, you can submit them by using the Q&A button on your Zoom webinar control panel. We will answer them as time allows at the end of the presentation. This session is being recorded, and the link will be made available on the Technical Committee on Project Management webpage. You can navigate to it by going to transportation.org/design and selecting Technical Committees, then Project Management from the menu on the left. An email with a PDA certificate will be sent to registered attendees later this week. If you can't find it, be sure to check your spam or junk folders. Download the certificate and keep it for your records. This webinar has a handout for use during the presentation. The link for downloading that handout will be shared with you in the chat box. Now I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Steve Bodge with Horrocks, and Paula Simmons with the Massachusetts Department of Transportation.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're very excited to have you with us. I will be monitoring the question and answer, so feel free to use that at any point from now until the end. If it's relevant, I will interrupt Michelle, and if it's more of a question that we could have answered at the end, I would probably wait and do that at the end. Next up is Paula to tell you a little bit more about who we are and who's going to present to you today.
Thank you, Steve, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Leading Your Projects with Values webinar, hosted by our AASHTO Technical Committee on Project Management. We're thrilled to have you with us today for this important and insightful discussion. This webinar is part of a series hosted by our committee with the goal of providing tools and strategies to help transportation professionals in the realm of project management. Today's presentation will feature Michelle Myers. Michelle is a dynamic business leader and trusted coach with over 28 years of experience in driving large-scale business transformation, organizational design and effectiveness, leadership development, strategic planning, and human capital services. Her diverse career spans management consulting and corporate leadership roles across HR, strategy and technology, culminating in her role as head of HR for a healthcare technology company. In 2015, Michelle founded her own leadership coaching business, Summit Leadership Coaching, through which she empowers leaders and teams to unleash their full potential and achieve their desired goals. Based in Denver, Colorado, Michelle shares her life with her husband, Craig, and their dog, Lulu. When she is not serving her clients, she enjoys a healthy, active lifestyle, quality time with friends, travel, cooking, and enjoying the simple moments of life. Thank you again for joining us. I'll now hand it over to Michelle.
Thank you, Paula. It's rare that we hear our bios read back to us. It felt like I was starting a dating site or something. So thank you for that great opening. And thank you to all of you for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited to share a little bit about values. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slides. And Steve, we're good? Great, thank you. So today we're going to talk about values and their role in leadership. And just for context, as someone who's lived a good life, meaning like I'm well into my career, as I'm sure many of you are. And so wherever you are in your career, I always like to share that a context I hold for leadership is it's not a title or a position. It's a way of being in the world. And so I hold leadership as anyone who is responsible for their world. And I use that context because we're all human and we're all living our lives at work, at home, in our communities, and who we are is how we lead. And so we get to be leaders with or without a title. And early in my career, I did spend some time through management consulting as a project manager. I would go into clients and I can understand and empathize. There's real complexity. Project managers really are leaders. It's really project leadership. You're managing multiple different aspects, many stakeholders, trying to get alignment. And it's a big role. It's a huge role and an important role in all organizations. So happy to be here and share what I'm up to with values. And so here's what we're going to focus on. We're going to talk about and learn the importance of values and why they matter in leadership, which is your work every day, why they matter in project management. So we're going to learn about why they matter. And what might be a little unique today in this webinar is we're going to spend some time, and so that's where you got this guide that was just sent out on the link. I'm going to walk you through some exercises to identify your values, and not just the values, but the behaviors. How do you know if you are leading, living, operating in or out of alignment with them? So it's one thing to name them, it's another thing to practice them. And then after we go through the exercise of identifying your values, I'm going to take you through an exercise to kind of bring it to life. Like, what would this look like today in a real life work situation? And then we're going to close and talk about how do we align values on a team? And what could that look like for you as maybe a suggestion or an invitation if you want to take this further into your project teams. So that's what we're going to do today. And as we get into this, because it's going to be a little more reflective and spacious, if you haven't yet, I would encourage you all to turn off phones, turn off email, and see if you can give yourself the gift of full attention and take this little moment today as almost a gift to check in and go inward with you, and maybe put a pause on all the noise and the needs and the work, and just take this next 40 minutes for you. Maybe if you're working from home or you're in your office, maybe there's even a different place you want to sit, right? To maybe shift your energy. So if you're not on camera, so the good part of a webinar is we don't see you. So maybe you sit on the floor, or you go by a window, but maybe just create some space for you to take this time to really kind of dig inward. So that'd be my invitation and recommendation if you are able. So that's what we're up to. So what are values? So just think for a minute and reflect, like when you think of values, what are they to you? What are values? Here's how I like to describe them. They're the thing that reveals the you in you. It's an internal belief, and really it's our compass. It's our compass back to ourselves. It's our compass that tells us if we're in alignment or out of alignment with something that we hold unique to us, because it's about us. They're very internal. The thing with values is they're always operating in us. They're present in our best and worst moments. They give us direction. They tell us what matters most to us. So sometimes we really can hone in, if we're paying attention to our values, on what makes us angry or when we are frustrated. Oftentimes, there's a value that is being stepped on or overlooked. And so they're always present. It's just whether or not we're really conscious of them. Dr. Brene Brown, she's an author, social worker, storyteller, leader. If you aren't familiar with her, you can probably go to TED Talk. I think she has one of the largest TED Talks ever on vulnerability. And I picked up my first book by Dr. Brene Brown 10 years ago. And along the last 10 years, I have followed her. I'm a facilitator in one of her leadership programs. And it was doing her work that really shifted a perspective I had on values. And so I want to share this with you. And this is her take, that a value is a way of being or believing that we hold most important. And when we live into or lead into our values, it means we do more than profess. We practice them. We walk our talk. We're clear about what we believe and hold important, and we take care with our intentions, words, thoughts, and behaviors to align with those beliefs. And so the shift that this presented for me is I had gone along in life, and I'm a coach. I was a leader. I was in consulting. I kind of always loosely maybe knew what I valued, but I'd never really taken the time to name them. And I would say over the course of the years, I could end up with a list of 5 or a list of 6. I work with teams in companies, and they'll try to have 8. Or even in my one-on-one coaching, a leader will say like, gosh, I just can't pick, I have 6. And the shift for me with values is how important it is to get to 2. And the minute I say 2, the people that want more because we feel like we are so much more than 2, I get the resistance. But what I want to share is there's usually kind of the core 2 that without them, the rest of our values don't show up. And if we have 10 values, it's really hard to lead through 10 things on any given day. And so it's hard to get back into alignment with ourselves if there's just too much. It's like if you have 10, you really have none. And so she introduced this concept through her Dare to Lead program around the top 2 core values. And she went one step further and really went into the behaviors and how important it is for leaders, teams, organizations to actually name the behavior that supports the value. And so that's what we are going to do today. Values aren't about professing or projecting our values onto others. It's about walking our value every day through difficulty, through the positive stuff, through the hard stuff. So that's a little context and where it comes from for me and what we're going to go through today. So here are my 2 values. I've refreshed these about every 18 months, and I will say over the last 8 years, they haven't changed. And there's big meaning behind these 2 words for me, as a person, as a leader, as a coach. And really for me, everything starts with connection. And as we go through today's webinar, we're going to get to a point where I'm going to encourage you all, if you come up with a word, to describe what it means to you. Because connection could mean so many different things to so many different people. And so for me, I know what this means, but I would never assume that it means the same thing if someone else had the same word. So these are the 2 I live by. These are the 2 I lean back into. These are the 2 that help me be me, and bring out the me in me. And so I wanted to share those with you, and I'll share a little more as we keep going through the webinar today. So why do values matter in leadership? What's the big deal? If you go Google research values in leadership, you're going to find a ton of research, a ton of information. And so here, this comes from Susan David's emotional agility work, Brene Brown's work, and a company called Leadership Circle. And so this is what's important about values in leadership. It's about bringing awareness, presence, and clarity to ourselves. It's about being able to check in and know who we are and have clarity on who we are. It enhances our emotional resilience. So when we are in times of strain, stress, maybe real big challenges, I imagine all of you in your work find that you are dealing with major complicated issues, more so than maybe other roles. the work you're doing out in the communities and roadways and bridges, there's consequence, there's real stakes here. And so your ability as a project manager to be emotionally resilient is really important. Values matter in leadership because it provides us a sense of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment. It keeps us connected to ourselves in a world of information everywhere, emotions everywhere, people's opinions everywhere, people being unhappy. I'm sure on more than one occasion, you all are delivering news to people that they may not want to hear, or it makes them angry. This is how you stay grounded to you and keep your own sense of purpose, meaning. This is how you build trust and integrity. So if you can think of leaders you've had the most respect for and the leaders where you didn't, there's probably something in here about integrity. When leaders lead through values, you can trust them. You know how they're going to show up every time, and you know they're likely not going to be reactive and responding and changing, kind of putting on a different coat in every meeting, right? Rather, in every meeting, they are just themselves, and how they show up and how they lead, you start to build trust for that because it's who they are, and they're not trying to please or control or adapt to make others happy or to fit in. Values matter in leadership for setting vision and strategy. It's really important that we bring our values into that process. Serves as a framework, decision-making, conflict resolution. I would say in all my coaching work, this is probably one of the top 3 places when clients are really stuck or where they're feeling conflict avoidant or conflict maybe aggressive. We tend to point to values as a place to shift perspective, a place to come back to a grounded emotional presence. And values-driven leadership inspires and motivates others. And without it, it's a core foundation for leading with courage and creating courageous cultures. So the more leaders can lead and lean into values, the more these things are going to be present and available. So this is why it matters in leadership. So what we're going to do is everyone should have the workbook. I think it was sent out in the chat. I'm going to give you a minute, and we are going to jump in and get started on a process that I use with all my clients. I've used this with teams, and I use it with one-on-one leaders. And it's mining for values. So when we get into story, it's an interesting experience in a way that we can connect back to ourselves through storytelling. So I'll give everyone a minute to adjust your screen. If you can get this up, you can type right in it. It's an editable PDF. And I'm going to have everyone select one of these 3 prompts. There's no wrong prompt. But maybe just look at these 3 prompts and see which one speaks to you in this moment. And I want you to think about, once you pick your prompt, think about the situation or the experience, and just take a minute to get yourself a little bit into that moment. So you'll have picked one of these. Either you're going to do some work around a meaningful peak experience, or you're going to connect through a frustration, or through someone you admire. And in your workbook, you have those 3 prompts. I'm going to give everyone about 4 minutes once you kind of have the story in your mind, and I want you to just start typing and type out, there's some prompts there, like what was happening, who were you with, what were you aware of, and I want you to write your own story around that experience, again, on one of these prompts. And you're just going to type. If you had a chance to print it, you can certainly handwrite it. But go ahead and start writing. I'm going to watch the clock. And we will check back in about 4 minutes. And if there are any questions on the exercise, feel free to put it in the Q&A. Okay, now that you've described and captured the story, whether you typed it or wrote it, and maybe if you just thought through it in your head, I want you to highlight or write any words or phrases that stand out to you as important, that like just jump out at you when you think about the story. So maybe you have 2 words that jump out at you, or maybe you see a theme that's starting to resonate or seems familiar to you. So go ahead and highlight or mark or write on a Post-it any words or phrases that stand out as important to you. And on page 2 of your workbook, you'll see the same thing I have up on the slide. Sometimes in our story, we can't find the words that way, but now that you've put yourself in a story, if the values didn't jump out on your own story, see if any of these words also jump out or are in addition to whatever you came up with through your mining story. So you can use this list if you need more examples or ideas. And I might encourage you no more than 8 initially. Like think about the 8 most important because we are going to work them down to 2. And again, there's no absolute on this. You can revisit this after the webinar, but for today, if you could work to a top 2, that would be great, or at least a priority order. So collect all your words. And sometimes a value has many different meanings. Like I opened with, I have a value of connection. So, but connection can mean so many different things. If helpful for you, or if maybe out of your 8 words, or maybe you have 10 words, 3 of them really seem like they get at the essence of something for you, then I would recommend you just string them, like freedom, independence, adventure. Like, so for this example, I have a client where freedom comes up a lot for people, but the first example is it was about independence and the adventure, where another client, it was about self-expression, creativity, and that's like how they thought about freedom. So if you have multiple words, but you feel like they're all a similar thing, feel free to do a word string like that example. And maybe you're connecting with this, or maybe there's too many. I would ask just pick 2 to go through the exercise and then you can revisit it. And sometimes to pick the top 2, I always recommend to clients, like which one has to be present for the other ones to show up. Like for me, nothing shows up if I'm in complete disconnection with myself. This has been a theme of my life. I have crappy behaviors when I'm disconnected. And so that's kind of my starting point. So maybe you have one where you're like, nothing else shows up without this one. So I'll assume we all have at least a good 1, 2, or 3 values identified. And I want everyone to do a gut check now. So where I open, like values are very internal. And so I love this gut check. So if you look at your list of values, do a check. Is this internal to you, the you in you? Does this help you stay and move towards your purpose? And there's a lot of talk and work around purpose, but what I'll say for here, think about who you are in your best moments on your best days. Likely your purpose is alive in you. So maybe you don't have a name for it, but think about your best energy, your best moments where you just feel like you are so you, comfortable you. So do these values help you work towards that? Do your values feel expansive? They're dynamic. They can have many different contexts. When you read them, do you feel a little free or a little connected? Do they empower your most authentic self? So this idea on like in your best moments, are any of the words on there really empowering for you? Do they help you with self-acceptance and self-trust? So oftentimes we're all human. We're all trying to do our best in this world. And none of us are perfect. We all have bad days. Do these values help you with acceptance and trusting yourself? And is it free from social comparison? So there should be no shoulding. I had a leader once and it's like, well, I should have these values. And he was a VP in accounting. And like, so if there's any shoulding and these are like a societal view on what a good value is and a good person is, it's probably not the right value. So there should be no social or external comparison. And if you were living fully in these, would you feel more fulfillment, joy, and connection? So that's like a gut check on like what a good values for this inner self, the you and you. Here's how you know. So I want everyone to look at your list. Is it external to you? Is it what society or others believe, think, or respect? If you have one of those on your list and it really came from a should, cross it off. It's probably not your value. Is it coming from your ego, the inner critic or fear-based, right? Like I'm sure all of you, like me, because again, we're human, have that inner critic, sometimes that not good enough, not as good voice, or that's the inner critic, and it's our ego. It's what our ego does. We want to make sure our values aren't our ego's values, because that's not us. That's our little self-protection mechanism. If your values feel limiting and constraining and fixed, like maybe it's an energy you feel when you read it. So check in with your body as you read these words. What feels open? What feels closed? Short term, does it feel like it's a goal or an achievement? If so, it's probably not a value. Doesn't mean it's not important. It's just probably not a value that's internal to you and the you and you. Shoulding energy, shoulding language, if there was a should in it, or a judgment of others or self, it's probably not a value. And if you look at the word and it's going to cause burnout or stress or hustle energy over time, it's probably not a value. So a final check on that list. And if you have worked to 2, that would be great. But at least at minimum, have one value that stands out to you. And we're going to go into the next part of this in your workbook. So this concept is we can't lead into what we can't name. So I know early in my adult journey, and even in the last, I'd say 15 years ago, I would have a list of values. There were times in my life where I had 5 and I'd work with someone or a leadership program or a leadership coach, and I'd have my 5. I'd create a nice sheet of paper. I never used it. I'd forget what they were. There were too many, and they weren't front and center for me. And so I'm literally at my monitor. Here are my 2 values. I'm not going to forget these. And it's even like a quarter of a Post-it because I just don't like a lot of mess around. But I'm not going to forget these. I don't have 5, I have 2, and they're front and center for me. So what I'd like everyone to do is name your 2 values. And I want you to reflect what it means to you. So give it like a description and real meaning. And then I want you to think through the behaviors. And so this is where I can say courage is a value of mine, but unless I am showing up every day and being courageous, and everyday courage, This is about having hard conversations, letting somebody know when they hurt my feelings, leaning into a conversation with a colleague where I feel tension or things are off or I don't feel alignment, that we're on the same page. So courage for me is about leaning in to hard conversations, because when I don't, all sorts of stuff starts to happen and I start operating out of alignment. And so like that would be an example. I know when I'm operating in alignment with courage. So my behaviors would be I'm leaning into hard conversations. I'm sharing and naming my feelings. That's courage for me. Someone else might have courage and it looks totally different. And so the idea of this exercise is name it for you. Because how will you know as a compass if you're in alignment or out of alignment with the value? If you have a question, I'm going to be quiet. So we're on page 3 of your workbook. I just want you to answer the prompts and just I'm going to give you all about 5 minutes. And if you do have a question, do submit it to Steve and we'll answer it while you're working on this. Okay, and I just answered a question. I saw a question come through. And it was a great question. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next part. The question, if you are feeling many values also for today, see if you can pick the most important. Again, it doesn't mean that the others aren't important. It just means that the you and you kind of starts with these first 2. And what I would say for anyone with integrity, think about our values is what keeps us in our integrity. Almost like integrity is the outcome or the impact of us operating in alignment of our values. So like when we hear things in leadership about authentic leadership and in leaders who have integrity, it's usually because they walk their talk, and that what they say in front of one person is what they say in another person. It means that if you have a value of fairness, it's not that you expect and want everyone else to have that value. It means that you and your leadership models that it has real meaning for you and your impact on the world. And it's unique to you. And it doesn't mean that other people don't value it. It's just not their internal compass. And it doesn't mean they devalue it. And so think of this as it's really the thing that you are bringing into your leadership. It's what makes you authentically you. And it's not about anyone else. So, but you may be in a meeting where you see people being treated unfairly, and it's a trigger for you because it goes against a belief you have. And so it's not that we project that everyone else has to be fair. It's how we understand in that moment, let's say, and hopefully this is a helpful explanation for everyone. If fairness is your value and you feel there are behaviors happening in a meeting and people aren't being treated fairly, that might be your own inner call to courage to speak up, not to make them wrong, but to lead in a place of bringing more fairness to the situation. And that's what you'll be known for, and that will be your impact because that's who you are. Hopefully that's helpful. And we're going to take a real life situation. So we're going to put this into practice on page 4 in your workbook. So I don't have a slide for this, but you all are on page 4. And I want you to think about a challenge you're facing at work and write a few sentences about the nature of this challenge, how you've been thinking or feeling or handling it so far. And just take a minute, like name the challenge and have it be real, like today, it's happening. And just take a minute to write down the challenge. And I'm offering a self-coaching technique right here. So you can use this beyond today or even use it with teammates when they are frustrated or challenged. Okay, so you have your situation named. I want you to form the challenge into a question, almost like a question you're asking yourself. So I'll give you an example. I had a coaching call yesterday with a client who I've been working with for about a year, and she is in complete overwhelm and super frustrated with her boss and peers. They're a small business, they're about 30 employees and expanding and growing. And she is the leader for business development and that growth. And because they're a small business, they have a lot of operational overlap. So she's very frustrated, roles aren't clear, they're growing, and she's starting to hit burnout and is starting to act out with frustration to her boss and her peers. So we've posed it into a question, and it was, what do you want to feel or be instead of overwhelm? So your question could be anything, but take your challenge and situation and give yourself a question. Like ask yourself maybe a what or how kind of question, not a why. You're not in analysis. So a what or how is a little more open and expanded question. And then I want you to think about your values and see what emerges from the perspective of your values. So you'd answer that question by leaning into your values and seeing what insights emerge. And sometimes our insights may not always have to be a clear answer or direction. It may inform us of a way of being, or sometimes with myself, and maybe you all experience this, and definitely with clients, sometimes it's just a weight. Like our insight that emerged from a value is patience, wait. So like it may not be an action or a doing that comes out of it. It might be a way of being that comes out of it, and kind of a reset and a perspective shift. And we'll have a Q&A. So in a minute, I'm going to go to the last section and offer a perspective on teams. So we just spent time, and I'm on page 5 of the workbook. And we just spent time really naming that values are internal to us. And so if we all have values, our organizations have their values, oftentimes on a wall and maybe not consistently practiced. But like a company has values, you have values, your whole team, everyone has their values. So I like to introduce this concept of team norms. So as project managers, you all are working with a broad set of resources. Sometimes they're your direct reports and part of your organization. Sometimes they're vendors, partners. And so as a project manager, this is a key tool in leadership, is that at the start of a project or in the middle of a project, you get to lead a discussion around the behaviors of the team that really are made up from the team. And so typically, and just not to confuse, norms are a very common thing. If you went out and researched articles and best practices for team norms, you will find a lot of really good information. And so I like to share this with you today as kind of the close, and to remember that your values are the you and you, and that they're the behaviors that you embody to be the most authentic you. And team norms, whether explicit or implicit, are the behaviors of the team, and they have an impact on the success of the team. And so the more norms are explicitly understood and shared, the better you all can perform as a team collectively. So values have behaviors and teams have behaviors, and the norms is a suggestion on how to think about it. Because all of us that make up a team are coming at it with our own values. And this is an exercise on naming what are the important behaviors that the team agrees are important for the team. And so it's typically made up of the collection of the thoughts, opinions, and needs of the team members. So on page 5, here are examples in your workbook on what it looks like to have implicit norms and what it looks like if they're explicit. And so take a minute and read this list and just think about one of your project teams right now. And just note, where are you seeing alignment or misalignment when you read these signals? So again, page 5 in your workbook. So maybe just what's present on your team right now? What are you noticing? And once you've noticed that, how can your values, your leadership values that you just named, which are your values, no matter what role you're in, at home, at work, community, how they can contribute to a more aligned team? So is there a call to action through your values to create a more cohesive, explicit norm set of behaviors for your team? So what can you do to create a more aligned team through the perspective of your values? And then if it feels appropriate, maybe note if there's something that was ignited in you today and there is an action that you may want to take for more shared aligned norms and values on your team. So maybe something sparked today that you might want to take action on. And then to close, I always like everyone to just take one thing away. This was a full hour. I love seeing that you all hung in here. I know this was a little different style webinar. So I hope you got some value out of it. But I always just like everyone, if you just take one thing away today that'll bring you closer to leading and living your values, what would that be? What's your one commitment to take with you today? And thank you. Thank you for hanging in. Thank you for showing up today. And hopefully you found this useful and can show up more wholeheartedly, more in alignment with yourself, and navigate this complex world just a little better and a little more connected to you. So thank you for the time. And Stephen, we can leave the slides up if there are questions or if we need to go back.
Yeah, we're getting some thank yous here. Back to you at the end here. Along the lines of teams, we had a question: what do I do when team members don't adopt or even respect my values? And I'm assuming that's coming from the perspective of a leader of that team.
Yeah. So what's interesting, one, I would say there's something about your values that are yours that other people aren't, it's not their value. And so depending on your organization or the context, this is where difficult conversations live. This is where getting alignment and agreement. Your values would likely be the thing that push you into that conversation or shape how you have the conversation or what's important about your values being stepped on. The other take I would say, and again, depending, context is everything. If they're not your direct reports, right? This is conflict management and relational management. And so I would explore resources that can help you with that. But your values are really a place for you to see like what's getting stepped on. And so, but someone's not going to value your value because it's not theirs. If it's a project team, I think those are big team discussions. That's where the norms come in. Like we need agreements as a team. And, you know, if you have a lot of resources and you're dealing with different vendors and partners, it's complex. And so you lean back into your values to stay grounded and connected to you and not let other people take you out of your integrity. That'd be my sense for that question. So we can't let other people take us out of our integrity. Like other people's crappy behavior can't take us away from who we are. And that's where our values help us come back to ourselves.
So I got more of a comment than a question, but my one commitment is to remain balanced and try to share some of the tools I use to focus on that balancement. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Somebody's telling you how they're going to move forward.
Yeah, that's great.
I will point out that the last page of the handout is basically a summary of what Michelle's company does for individuals or teams. So feel free to reach out to her for anything you may need along those lines in the future. I want to wrap this up in respect of people's time. We'll try to be finished on the hour here, but there's a lot of thank yous and a lot of hand clapping on the app
Okay.
here for you, Michelle, and I do appreciate you giving us your time and
Absolutely.
making us better leaders. So wait a second. Okay. I just had a thank you to me, which is not important,
Yeah,
but
thank you. And thank you for inviting me and having me share this time with you all today. Thank you.
all right.
Yeah.
Anything else, Trisha or Paula?
No, just thank you, Michelle. This was very interesting and very helpful, and something that people can take away, personally and professionally. So
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Great. Thank you, Paula.
Okay, that
All
ends
right.
today's webinar, and we'll see you in approximately 3 months.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.